Brad. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you today, Alexandra?
I'm doing absolutely amazing, except a little, you know, power outage there in the morning, but we're on track, so that's good.
Amazing. Yeah, there was a big blip last night where we were as well, and some
Yeah,
of the stuff got fried, but we're
yeah.
back online. It's all
We're
good.
back
Yeah.
online. That's it. That's what counts. Yes. So, Brad, could you please share with us and share with the audience of what you do?
So I wear many different hats, and the easiest way to explain it without taking up too much airtime is the two sort of areas that I've spent most of my time in. Is for the last 20 years, I've spent my time in functional medicine, clinical nutrition. Those are sort of my two core modalities. And then I'm trained in a whole bunch of other stuff from biotherapeutic drainage, herbs. I've done quite a lot of study into Ayurveda, especially in the early days, clinical detoxification, and so on. I also did an energy medicine apprenticeship. So using like quantum devices, measuring people's not their aura, it's really their biofield, right? Using
Mhm.
gas discharge visualization. So very, very out there kind of stuff. But that's where I've spent the last 20 years. And I've run a clinic. It's a private practice where I mostly I sort of worked my way into it over the years. Spend most of my time there with helping people with autoimmune disease, gut health issues, and hormones, and kind of the intersection of those three things. Because
Mhm.
as time went by, I realized that you can't separate those things. And so a lot of people that were coming in with gut health issues also happened to have hormone problems. People
Yes.
coming in with autoimmune issues had gut health problems, and so on and so forth. So I would say that's like where I've spent a lot of my time, and then worked with supplement companies. I've worked with different companies around the world doing product formulation, doing product education, stuff like that. And so I spent a good deal of time in the natural health products
Mhm.
space. And then I would say the other half of my time, I've really been quite a staunch advocate for health freedom, bodily autonomy,
Mhm.
um, that sort of thing as well. So I've been quite outspoken for a number of years on my own podcast and on different platforms, just about things like genetic modification, Roundup and glyphosate. I've spent a lot of time researching that and working with organizations.
Mhm.
Um, I would say vaccines as well to some degree. And then, of course, during the pandemic, I just like went crazy in terms of publishing so much stuff. So much so that, I took a break. So I took a year break, kind of did some other things, spent a lot of time doing masterclasses for practitioners as well. And so now, after a break, I'm sort of like coming back out with a new podcast and spending most of my time actually on that, as well as some other business ventures. But I stopped practicing about a year ago. And, I've really been helping practitioners more than anything else
Mhm.
through, yeah, masterclasses, business coaching, stuff like that.
That's very interesting. There's a lot of going on.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I feel, I actually feel like I've historically had too many irons in the fire, but
Mhm.
these days I've trimmed a lot of stuff back, so I've learned to say no. So I usually do not take on any new opportunities. I don't, there's no shortage of opportunities, but I'm pretty laser focused on just a handful of things these days.
Mm.
Aside from my normal life where I have wife, kids, and
Right.
a regular life.
Yeah,
Yes,
well, we have to enjoy our lives, right? I think it's
exactly.
important to kind of find that balance. Because I found myself too, there was a point in my life where I would be like, whew, focusing on so many things and then forgetting about other things. So I'm like, okay, how do I balance that, right? And I think a lot of things did come out during COVID. So it
Hmm.
was kind of like, okay, let's just take it. Like I took a break too and trying to figure out what I want to do. It's which directions I want to go to. So it's kind of
Yeah.
important to balance that out.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, if you have an entrepreneurial mind, everyone's got ideas. Like I have 1,000 ideas by the time I've had breakfast. So the challenge is always what ideas do you want to execute on? And, that comes with time. So after 20 years, you sort of learn like, okay, maybe I don't want to seize every opportunity. Maybe I don't want to do all of these things. But it's hard sometimes because we live in that world. There's the world is so saturated with information. There's no shortage of things we want to do. I'm a bit of a polymath in the sense that I love lots of different things. So I have lots of different interests, and I'm quite passionate about some of those interests as well. But I also, remind myself I have the same 24 hours in the day that
That's it.
everyone else has, right? So,
That's it. That's it. So you
yeah,
have to
yeah,
pick and choose, right? So
yeah.
let's talk about a little bit more about the health, about how everything's connected in terms of gut hormones. Can you share that with us? Because I think this is so important. I find a lot of people, being in this practice myself for a while, I find people really are still looking for a quick fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how do you navigate through that? How do you help them? So what would you suggest for someone, for example, if they're, let's say you're dealing with women with hormones, right?
Mm-hmm.
How would you guide them through to help them through that process?
Yeah. So I'm going to try and condense this as much as I possibly can because, the way that I work anyway and the way that I teach practitioners is, a roadmap system, if you will. So you're 100% correct. So what a lot of people do, people themselves and also practitioners, is they're actually managing the downstream symptoms of whatever the illness or illnesses are, or I would call them imbalances, but people will know what I mean when I say disease or illness.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening is that you have, we still have this kind of like Western doctor type of approach where it's like, oh, I have this disease. What supplements should I take for this disease? And it's like, it's a very unholistic way of thinking about things, right? So a better way to look at it is to sort of say, well, why do you have what you have?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I look at it. Why do you have what you have? What's going on from a foundational perspective? People always ask me, what is functional medicine, right? And it's a great question, because what is functional medicine? Most people have no clue. And they sort of go, well, it's a blend of science and natural medicine and this and that. The easiest way to explain it is functional medicine is about running tests and assessing metabolic function and then restoring function.
Mm-hmm.
However you want to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually diet, lifestyle, supplements. So the way that I approach these things is, a big one is why, like what's applying pressure to the body. So if you think about it like this, right? So allostatic load. So your allostatic load is your total body burden. So what are all the things that are filling up your barrel? What are all the things that are loading you up with stressors?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this could be your environment. This could be your home environment. It could be your job. It could be genetics. It could be diet. It could be toxins. All of these things. So the first step is actually to lighten the load. And, because everyone's concerned about what to take and what should I eat and what should I put in. I'm very concerned about what should I take out. And so that's really the first step. The first step is to sort of identify, like, what are these stressors to the body?
Mm-hmm.
How can we remove them, lessen them, etc.?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no point in adding more things in. Like a great
Not
example.
gonna work.
It's not going to work. Like very straightforward here. So let's say someone has mold toxicity, okay, and I'm giving them binders and I'm giving them antifungals, but they're still exposed to mold in their home.
Right.
You're trading water at that point. So it's the same thing with food allergies,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's another good starting point, is doing some type of elimination diets, basically just trying to lighten the load, work with more of a blank slate, and then move forward into detoxification.
It's like
Typically.
basically peeling out the onion,
Yeah.
peeling the layers, or the easiest way to say it is rip off the Band-Aid and really
Yeah.
get to the core of it.
Yeah. But what a lot of people do, detoxification is very popular these days as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of buzz about that. But if you haven't prepared someone for detoxification and you just pull a 180, they're going to have a very, very difficult time. They're going to have die-off reactions. Their liver can't function properly, even though it's got support. So a big part of what I do is, this is where biotherapeutic drainage comes in, is actually, when people think of detoxing, they typically think, okay, liver, kidneys, bowel kind of thing, right? So just get things moving out. But a lot of toxins actually accumulate in between the cells of the body. And so draining the extracellular matrix and detoxifying in between the cells and starting to move the lymphatics is really the first step of detoxification. Then you would support the liver. then you would make sure, I mean, liver and bowel kind of go together, but then you would make sure. So what I do is actually move people, maybe a month or two of just preparing them for detoxification.
Right.
Then moving them into detoxification, which might be another month to 3 months. Right. And then you see where you land up from there. So, coming back to your question, that's, by the way, is a good route for people with autoimmune disease. It's a very good route for people with gut health issues. Mm-hmm. And coming back to your question about hormones, a lot of hormone imbalances, like when you really get into it, yes, there's the endocrine side of things, right? So there's, whether it's your thyroid or your adrenals or what have you. But a lot of that, again, adrenals, what's stressing out the adrenals? Mm-hmm. Food allergies, gut infections. Okay.
Yeah, because people right away think that when they have adrenal, they think of stress. Yes, there's stress, but they don't really think about that the particular food can cause that issue.
Yeah. Well, the biggest stressors on the adrenal glands, believe it or not, one is blood sugar. That's probably one of the top ones. So, and so many people have hypoglycemia, pre-diabetes, diabetes, like that gradient. So many people are on that spectrum, right? So blood sugar, gut infections, and food allergies are the three biggest stressors on the adrenal glands. And those are all internal. So you can meditate, you can do yoga, you can do all those things, manage your life is great, right? It's fantastic. But if you're not dealing with these things, and, we just said food allergies and we said gut infections, that's all originating from the gut. Mm-hmm. So this is why gut health is so important, right? All of your hormones are detoxified through your liver.
That's it.
You've got things like dopamine, serotonin, melatonin. A lot of these things are synthesized and or quite active in the gut. So, a lot of, I could go on, like gallbladder and thyroid connection, is huge, right? So this is why what I've seen in my experience anyway, is that when you follow that sort of like roadmap, if you will, what typically happens is by the time you get to, 3 to 6 months, depending on the severity of things, what you'll actually find is the work that you need to do on the hormone side of things is way less. Okay, because what most practitioners do is they go, okay, so you have PMS or you've got PCOS or what have you. What are the supplements that will help to alleviate the symptoms? And that's where they start, right? Without doing all of that groundwork and the background work, what you're doing is you're basically managing symptoms with supplements. And the problem there is that you're not fixing anything, one. Two, you're becoming dependent on the supplements. And so what happens is typically people, when they stop taking the supplements, they go, oh, my symptoms came back. Right. This is no different from the way that drugs work, in a sense. Okay. Just less side effects and toxicity and what have you, though.
That's a good point, because I think a lot of people or practitioners are either not being taught that, or they have no clue of how to actually get to that point. Right. Because it's easy as a practitioner to be like, oh, here is your vitamin supplementation. Take them. And then rotate them every 3 months. So I really appreciate you saying this, because I think, again, it is so important to get to the core of that issue, whatever the issue is.
Yeah, and this the tenets of this is actually not new information. When you go back into old school, homeopathy principles and laws, Herring's law of cure, for example. When you look at the foundations of naturopathic medicine, which have really become so derailed over the years. This is actually how things were historically done. I'm just kind of old enough and I got taught by old school people that I know that. But a lot of the new training now, it's very westernized, it's very sciencey. So what happens is people go, oh, show me the studies. Well, if you want to do a scientific study, I have to control all the variables, right? So what I have to then do is say, okay, well, if I want to look at does something work for PCOS, I need to just study, okay, what are the symptoms of PCOS? And when I introduce this remedy, what happens to the symptoms of the PCOS? Because I need to monitor that, right? So like, that's just the way science is, right? And I don't have a problem with science, but I think from a holistic perspective, science is a little bit pigeonholed in that sense where, you can only, it's A plus B equals C and that's it.
Right. Well, there's not a lot of studies that have been done. Although we know that Chinese medicine has been working for thousands of years, or Ayurveda has been working for thousands of years, 7,000 years or something like that, right? So I think getting to that point and maybe yes, there should be some little scientific evidence of it, but I think
Hmm.
the answer's in the pudding right there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just to actually broaden our scope and to sort of say, like, and again, it's not science's fault. I'm not an anti-scientist.
Right.
There's it's actually to broaden our view and to look at things holistically, because everything is connected, right? So if you look at PCOS, I know I keep coming back to this just because that's where we've landed up today.
Yeah.
But PCOS, I mean, all of the studies that have been done on PCOS, there's certain diagnostic criteria that have to be met to actually formally diagnose PCOS. And one of the criteria that's sort of hidden in the background is hypoglycemia and blood sugar issues. So in a lot of studies, I mean, upwards of 90%, some studies have shown 100% of women with PCOS have hypoglycemia.
Mm.
Now, how does hypoglycemia tie in with ovaries, right? If I was to study that through a scientific lens, I mean, you can't study that, right? How do you know what I mean? So that's what I mean by things are not a straight line. And I think that that's where it's difficult. You're trying to sort of ram a square peg into a round hole when
Right.
you're looking at like a holistic view, and then map that onto a scientific perspective, right? So again, I think that we need to sort of bring both of those things together in a sense, and realize as well that as I discussed, nothing changes overnight. Okay, nothing in the body changes overnight. For you to get well, it's going to take you time, right? I mean, if it took you 40, 50, 60 years to get to where you are now, it's certainly not going to be a 2-week protocol or a 3-month
Absolutely.
protocol to get you back. It's going to take
Absolutely.
some time. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot of people coming with weight loss
Mm-hmm.
to me, and I always say it's not a quick fix. You can do this. It's not a month of lose that 10 pounds or 5 kilos or whatever it is. It's a journey. It's a journey of coming from here. It could be 6 months to 9 months of you actually to lose those 10, 15 pounds, whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very important to educate your clients or people in general that things takes time. Like
Yeah.
you said too, like, it took you 40 years or let's say 30 years even to get to that point. Well, it might take you longer to get to that health, to get to that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, so weight loss is a great example, right? I mean, with weight issues, you're really sort of straddling a few different lines. One of those being diabetes or pre-diabetes, and there's usually almost always a blood sugar component to that.
Right.
You then have a metabolic issue whereby you're not burning fat efficiently, right? So you can't like stabilize that or keep that on an even keel. And then that opens the door to a whole bunch of other potential issues, heart disease, etc. So like what you're talking about there is you're talking about over a long, and this really applies to all chronic degenerative disease for that matter, is you're talking about a slow degradation, right? So in the case of weight issues, what you're talking about is really your metabolism and your metabolic function has slowly become degraded over time.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for you to restore balance and get that to an optimal level, it's going to take you some time because you essentially have to retrain your cellular mechanics, if you want to look at it like that, to process all these things properly. This is when you get into like the ketogenic diet and stuff like that. I mean, to become fat adapted takes you at least 6 weeks
Yeah.
just to retrain your body, and then you kind of go down the weight loss train after that. So everything takes time. But as you were saying in the beginning, everyone's looking for a quick fix, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
What are your thoughts on ketogenic diet or even the carnivore diet?
yeah. Well, how long do we have?
Lots of time.
I think the ketogenic diet, I mean, it's not a new diet. It's been around for well over 100 years. This was the sort of frontline diet for epilepsy before they had medication. So I think that's got a much better track record, in terms of we've had a good chance to look at it. There's certain things we know, there's certain things we don't know. And I think also there have been a lot more people that have been long-term on a ketogenic diet as opposed to a carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
So the carnivore diet, aside from the people that are big in the carnivore space, with hundreds of thousands of followers, some of these people have sort of led the path forward, and maybe they've been carnivore for 8 years or 10 years now. So there's two ways to look at this, right? And there's lots of nooks and crannies and weeds that we could get into, but just generally speaking, with a carnivore diet and with a keto diet, but more a carnivore diet, there's a trade-off, right? Everything is a trade-off. So from a metabolic standpoint, if you restrict carbohydrates, your body has two fuel sources, right? We can burn carbs, we can burn fat.
Mm-hmm.
The more carbs I introduce, the less fat I burn. Okay, so glucose or carbohydrates are really the rate limiting factor for fat metabolism and fat burning. Okay, so that's really the fundamental premise behind the ketogenic diet. So if I increase, a lot of people get this wrong as well. They go, oh, if I just increase my fats, then I'm going to lose weight. And it's like, nope, you can't eat carbs and then also eat lots of fats and then expect to lose weight. It's like you have to have the carb restriction component as well, and then crank up the fats as your fuel source. Okay. So for weight loss, 100%, it works. I don't think anyone can argue with that. And yes, there are other benefits as well. The question I have and the concern I have is that what are you doing to your microbiome? Okay, what are you doing to the gut bacteria? Like your gut bacteria, this is pretty well established, and this is again an area of specialty. Like I've been doing a gut health masterclass for many years now and had hundreds of students come through that. And when you look at the microbiome, we know that different types of fibers, right, different types of polysaccharides feed different bacterial organisms. Right. Okay, that's well established. So when you're on a carnivore diet, with a keto diet, you can still eat those fibers. You can still eat some plants. You eat less of them, but you're still consuming those things. Whereas a carnivore diet, you're not consuming any of them. So there's really no polysaccharides coming in. There's no fiber coming in at all. Right. And so the question that I have is, what does that do to the microbiome? You're essentially starving out your good bacteria. Mm-hmm. Now, people on I went carnivore for 3.5 months, by the way, and then I did stool testing on myself. And what I did notice was that everything was good. Like the lab that I tested through, they actually, just because I have relationships with labs, and we got together and they said, hey, we want to go over the report with you. And I was like, sure, let's go for it. And they said, looking at this report, there's only 2 people that have had a good, healthy report like this that we've seen. And I was like, oh, interesting. They said, but there's one weird anomaly is that because no symptoms, right? So no symptoms, no gas, no bloating, nothing like that, perfectly healthy after 3.5 months on a carnivore diet. But the lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium were low. And they said, we don't understand why it's low. And I said, well, would it help if I told you that I'm coming off the back of 3.5 months of carnivore? And they were like, oh, that makes sense. So that was interesting to me. But the reason why you don't have any symptoms, okay, is because if you think about it logically, your body will absorb protein and fat, correct? Right. Your body doesn't absorb fiber. So that's what all of the fecal matter is actually the fiber. So what's happening on the carnivore diet is because you're not mixing all of these things together and you just have protein and fat, right, your body absorbs all the protein and fat. There's no food combining issues. There's no gas production. Right. So people go, oh my gosh, I got no gas, I got no bloating, but my bowel movements went down. Why does your bowel movements go down? Oh, because you're actually absorbing everything into your body. So it's a very, it's very interesting. And from a metabolic standpoint, I mean, look, I'm not going to argue at all. I lost a lot of weight on the carnivore diet, so much so that I actually stopped doing it because I was sort of concerned that I was losing too much. Mm-hmm. And I'm coming up on almost 50 years old now. And so, being older, it's harder to maintain muscle mass, right? You have to really work at that. So when you start burning away all your fat and then you're struggling to kind of put on muscle mass, right? I lost a ton of weight and I was like, I don't know if I want to keep going down this road. And so I sort of went off it. And for me, I sort of gravitate towards more of a higher protein, higher fat kind of diet anyway. Mm-hmm. But I consider myself a flexitarian. I always have. I've done the vegetarian thing. I've kind of eat whatever. And I'm pretty healthy. Touch wood. I don't have any health issues. Touch wood, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I went carnivore for about a month, and I enjoyed it. In in the sense of my hormones balanced, and actually it was really
Mm.
good. I actually was really good. But my body, and I always say this to my clients as well to myself, that you have to listen to your body.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, my body was just like, no, you need
Yeah.
to eat other things. So I started incorporating again a lot of fiber, a lot of vegetables, and so on. And I need that in my life. I just couldn't
Yeah.
do it more than a month.
Well, another interesting thing, and so what's funny to me is as well, like the carnivores will rail on the vegans, and they'll sort of go, oh, look, these vegans, it's deficient in this and that, and you need to take these B12 supplements and you need to take iron supplements. And it's like, okay, fine. I'm not going to argue. However, on the carnivore diet, like, why is it that people have electrolyte imbalances?
Right.
It's quite common, right? So what's happening there is you're not getting minerals in your body. And so I actually did mineral testing on myself because I was starting to get crazy cramps. Like I was waking up in the night, like foot cramps, like I was getting these headaches that were not normal to me. I got these like weird muscle spasms in my body as well, which I'd never had before. And when I tested my minerals, what did I notice? My calcium, magnesium were super low.
Right.
Well, a lot of calcium, magnesium comes from plants. Right. And so I wasn't getting that. So these are just little subtle things that I noticed. And so again, what am I going to do? Well, now I have to get on calcium, magnesium supplements.
Right.
That's not really sustainable.
So
now I
there's
have to
that
stop making these.
balance in a way,
Yeah.
right?
So then people are starting to make like, snake juice and all of these electrolyte drinks and stuff like that. I'm like, well, then better off than a vegan diet, right? Because you rail on them that they need all this extra supplementation, but here you're trying to biohack your way around things by adding in other supplements, right? So I just think that, again, as a flexitarian, like I can see the merit on all of those diets. I just think that when you gravitate a little too far to the extremes, the thing that I question is how sustainable is that in the long run? I think that's really the point.
I think at the end of this discussion, I think we all can agree that eating a whole food balanced diet is very important.
Yeah. That's the main thing. People can get super complicated with things. And I think, one question that's always been on my intake forms, I have lots of different questions. They're 17 pages long. And there's one question that every single person checks the box to. Okay. And that question is, are you confused about nutrition advice? Every single person checks that box, right? So what's happening out there is you've got you follow these influencers, you read blogs, you go to a keto summit, you go to a vegan conference and whatever, and you become enamored with the ideology sometimes, with the people that are promoting that, with the content, with the culture that surrounds these things. Like the culture around the carnivore diet these days particularly is very much this like, ripped like alpha male kind of that persona. And then, contrast that to like the vegan persona, which might be a lot more like, hey, we're spiritual. And, so if you gravitate towards the sort of ideology or the culture that surrounds these things, sometimes what happens is we'll end up eating our opinions and our beliefs instead of what's actually right for us. And so I found that as well. And then what happens is people so strongly believe in that even if they're not feeling well or they're showing signs of imbalance, they still just keep on with it. Right. Without actually listening to what their body needs.
It's a very good point. I had a friend who has been a plant-based for quite some time, for like 12 years or so.
Yeah.
And she just turned 50 as well. And going through menopause was quite challenging. And then at that one point, she's like, you know what, being vegan and being a plant-based, my body was just saying no more.
Yeah.
So she's like, I actually went and I had a steak. My body was craving steak and I could not say no to myself. So, it's these things, like I think that when we do become aware of these things, I think the noise in the background will come and you take those, not blinders, but these headphones off and you really start listening and connecting within your body. You will find the answers.
Yeah. I mean, that happened to me in a sense where I was vegetarian for about 3.5 years. And yeah, towards the end of that, I was like, oh man, I'm just like, this is just not really working for me. This was when I first got into nutrition, right? So, a lot of this is still being taught at schools, where it's like everyone needs to go more plant-based, everyone needs to include all, whole grains and legumes and all these types of things. And it's like, the truth is that it doesn't work for everyone. I mean, now there's so much research coming out on things like lectins, on phytates and enzyme inhibitors and oxalates and all these types of things. So it's not to say that these are bad in and of themselves, but for certain people, like if I look at my daughter's 4, and my wife, they cannot handle beans. Like, it just doesn't. My daughter actually, when she was nursing, if my wife would eat beans, then nurse, right? So my daughter wasn't even on solids yet. She would get gassy. So there's something in the beans that she just does not jive with. My son, completely different, right? My other daughter, completely different. So I think that was interesting. That was quite a aha moment for me to see that. It's like, oh wow, this kid is sensitive to beans and she's not even eating them yet. And now I just don't bother giving her beans, right? So how many people out there are following this sort of like generic advice of, well, if I just make sure I eat like whole grains and then legumes and a little bit of meat and some vegetables and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's all good and well if you're healthy and you have nothing going on. But for some people, like for people with autoimmune disease, that high grain and legume diet is probably fueling a lot of the symptoms that you're experiencing. So this is why an autoimmune paleo diet, or going down that road, works so well for those people, right? Because you've now eliminated the grains and the legumes. So I think that what I'm getting at is that there's many roads up the mountain, right? There's many roads on the path to wellness, and I don't think that people really need to tune into what's working for them. If it's not working for them, or they're still feeling sick despite whatever diet they're consuming, they need to sort of revisit that and say, hey, maybe I need to expand, right? I put people on GAPS diet before, which is very restrictive. It's kind of a soft carnivore diet, if you would. But boy, I mean, I've had people that symptoms have I would say come down anywhere from 70 to 90% in less than a week. It comes back to that allostatic load. It comes back to those triggers, right? So simply removing the triggers from the dietary side of things can really propel someone forward to the point where it's actually a shock for some people. Like, their body goes into a state of shock when they go into that. And it's not because of the carb or protein or fat restriction or whatever. It's actually because suddenly these things that have been bogging you down for so long have removed, and the body like goes, oh my gosh, I can finally breathe here. Like, it's a sigh of relief, and it's just a release, And so people have, I've had a lot of people that have had these crazy experiences when they get on these diets.
Food is powerful.
It is. Food
is very powerful, except you have to just know which one to consume, which one not. But is this something connected to, let's go back to talk about GMOs, glyphosate and things like that. Is it because everything is so genetically modified, sprayed? What is the reason why people actually react to these foods?
Yeah, so, and it's like, I think that's an ongoing discussion. Not everything is genetically modified. So let's just say that, so I think that a lot of people go, oh my gosh, don't eat wheat because it's genetically modified. Like, they're not GMOing wheat. Okay. So that's just one example. The problem that we have, I think, let's talk about the spraying. So the use of glyphosate or Roundup, I think, is a big problem in today's world. If you look at all of the agricultural chemicals that are used today, so that is your pesticides, your like all the chemicals that they would use in farming, glyphosate accounts for 63% of that. So it's by far the most widely used agricultural chemical. And in the last 10 to 15 years, we've actually sprayed 75% of the Roundup or glyphosate ever made. So what's happened is we've actually watched this exponential increase in use. It's become pervasive across the food system now. And it's so much so that it's actually started contaminating other foods, right? So one of those is pea protein. So we actually did a study with the Detox Project. It's an organization based out of Europe. And what they did was they actually looked at 27 organic bulk pea protein suppliers in the US. Okay, so I'll say that again. So these are people that are supplying bulk pea protein. It's all organic, and they're supplying that into the marketplace for pea protein supplements or to vegan foods as thickener or what have you, right?
Right.
They found that 26 out of 27 of those suppliers had unacceptably high levels of glyphosate in the pea protein.
Wow.
Weird, right? So why is that? Well, it turns out that it's not because they're, sort of secretly conspiring and going, ha ha ha, we're going to add it in there. What's actually happening is at the supply chain level, there's cross-contamination.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how pervasive it is. That's how, it's everywhere now. And I think that there's a few things, correlation is not causation, sure. But I think if you plot on a graph the increase in autoimmune disease, it plots very, very well with the increased use of glyphosate. Okay. If you plot, and I know this is a contentious issue, but autism, I spent a good deal of time in the autism space. If you look at the increase in autism and the increased use of glyphosate, they plot pretty well as well,
Yeah.
So we now have this other process that they are doing, which was never done before, but it started a few years ago, and now they've sort of ramped that up as well. It's a process called desiccation. So like if you look at coming back to grains and beans, right? So when you look at genetic modification, if you genetically modify something to withstand Roundup, aka glyphosate, what that means is I'm going to create a soy plant that if I spray that whole field with Roundup, the only thing that's going to be left standing is going to be the soy. All the weeds will be dead, everything will be dead, right? Except for the soy. So now that's historically how it was used. Now what they've done is they said, okay, so what about my non-GMO? Okay, so if I sprayed that on non-genetically modified soy, it would kill the plant, right? Because it's not, right. So now what they've figured is like, okay, so you've seen the non-GMO project label on foods? Yeah. It's everywhere, right? And it was great intentions. They started out good. They're still good. Not bashing them at all. But just because something's not genetically modified doesn't mean that it hasn't been sprayed with Roundup.
Right.
It's a very important point.
Yeah, it's the GMO project, isn't it?
Yeah, the non-GMO project. Yeah, so they basically have a certification to say, hey, you submit your food product and say this doesn't contain GMO ingredients, and they say, boom, here's a stamp of approval. But here's the problem: is that coming back to desiccation, right? So when you typically when you harvest things, right? So if I harvested my grains and I harvested my legumes, okay, what I would do is I would harvest them and then I would dry them out. And after they've dried, I would then process them, and I had all my beans, my peas, my grains, what have you, and off they go to market, okay, or for storage. What desiccation does is they've figured out now, they say, well, hang on, it's actually easier at time of harvest, so 3 or 4 days prior to harvest. What they do is they actually spray the whole field with Roundup. Because what's it going to do? It's going to kill all the plants, and then the plants are going to dry in the field instead of dry in the barn. So what's happening now is you've got this process of desiccation is resulting in non-genetically modified foods that have Roundup in them now. So what people are doing, consumers are walking around going, oh my gosh, this has a non-GMO project label on it. Fantastic. Off I go. Meanwhile, they're thinking that, it doesn't have Roundup or glyphosate. And that's where the Detox Project, you can go and check them out, detoxproject.org. What they've done is they have a glyphosate residue-free certification.
Okay.
So in other words, even if your product's not certified organic, you can submit your lab testing and stuff like that to them. They will actually give you a stamp that says it's Roundup free.
Okay, wow.
Which is kind of interesting. Yeah. So I think, that was a very long answer to the question, but I think that is definitely one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are quite sick today. I did a podcast with Jeffrey Smith a few years ago, and he had a documentary. I think it's called The Seeds of Deception. I might be wrong on that. Anyway, or Secret Ingredients, I forget. But basically what that documentary did was it showed these families, and these families just ate a regular standard diet. They ate a whole foods diet, whatever, but it wasn't organic. Okay. The one family, between 4 of them, had, I think, 47 diagnosed diseases.
Wow.
And what they did was they put them on a challenge for like 4 weeks or something to go 100% organic. Almost all of those things got better. So it's very powerful just to see that. I mean, look, and I want to be clear. I don't think that's the only reason why people are getting sick these days. I mean, there's
Other
there's
components.
many things. Yeah, I mean, it's the the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to
Right,
speak, right?
right.
But yeah.
So again, this can be a very long subject. We can
Hmm.
talk about it probably all day. But how can people? I mean, yes, we can buy organic, but we've also heard that even though they spraying the field, the environment, and that stuff, let's say the wind blows the wrong direction, and all the settlements settles on the organic farming, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even the organic products are not 100% clear, let's just
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So, would you recommend, for example, something to either look at the dozen dirty and the 10 clean foods? What would you recommend to the clients who are or customers of yours,
Yeah.
or whoever wants to get that knowledge?
Yeah. I mean, I think look, you got to live in the real world as well. So like, if you start going down all these rabbit holes, you're basically going to land up being a breatharian, perhaps, and that'll be it, right?
We
Because
can
everything is.
live on this air, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can't do that either because the air is toxic too, right? So
That's it.
when you get into the doomsday side of things, I mean, everything is bad for you, right?
Right.
So pick
You
your
gotta pick and
poison.
choose,
Yeah,
yes.
everything is bad for you. All the plants are trying to kill you, according to the carnivores. The meat is terrible for you, according to the vegans. The water is polluted. The air is toxic. So, yeah, I try not to really spend too much time thinking about that stuff, to tell you the truth, because I think that our minds, your determinant for health is driven a lot by your mind.
Right.
And so you can make yourself sick. I mean, this is what orthorexia is. Orthorexia is becoming so consumed and worried about becoming sick that you make yourself sick, right? And all that is a product of your mind.
Absolutely.
So I think that, the clean 15, the dirty dozen, I think that's fine. You have to live in the real world as well. Like, not everyone, especially these days, not everyone has the means to buy everything organic. I mean, you want to go and buy organic ghee and use that on the regular, that's like $25 for a tiny little thing of organic ghee. That's just one thing.
Yeah,
So I
especially
think
with the
that,
pricing right now too.
yeah, it's crazy.
Expensive.
Yeah, I mean, inflation, cost of living, so yeah, we need to consider that. And I think that without agonizing over things, I think that going, consuming like clean 15, dirty dozen, trying to buy the dirty dozen organic as much as you can, 100%, right? The clean 15, these are the products that are less sprayed. They're typically not GMO'd, etc. Those maybe you can afford to buy them not organic if the budget's not working. I think that, again, I come back to the basics, right? The basics, for health, as far as I'm concerned, is starting with a clean, as much as you can, a clean whole foods diet, right? That's a starting point. Lifestyle, so managing your stress levels, right? As much as you can. That's a whole nother conversation. Another big one, though, is circadian rhythm. So actually getting your day light cycle, there's so much research on this now, is actually getting proper sleep, getting your day night cycle. This was according to Bernard Jensen, the fourth pillar of health, was sleep. And people kind of like,
deprived, yes.
Yeah, we're sleep deprived.
Electronics, everybody's doing their things, and
Yeah.
sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay.
In February, I was in Nicaragua, and be honest with you, it was just so amazing to disconnect from everything.
Yeah.
And they don't have the hour change, and I found it that the sun was up at 6 o'clock. And it went down at 6 o'clock. And literally, we were up before 6. So the sunrise, we went to see the sunset. And then literally after supper, we went to look at the sunset.
Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing just to, within that time, to be connected with this whole rhythm. Like you said, it was really, really amazing. And then you went to bed early. You were up early. Like, it was great.
Yeah.
It's different.
I mean, that's what, so like, I think having younger children kind of helps me as well, because they're very much on a certain schedule. So like, I don't go to bed late. I haven't for many years now. And I'm a pretty early riser. So I'll kind of, keep farmers' hours for the most part. You know, I kind of go to bed with the sun, wake up with the sun.
Yeah.
Winter a little different, just because we have shorter daylight hours here.
Yes.
But you know, you mentioned like Nicaragua, Costa Rica, like Central America. It's interesting because you know, they don't have any real seasons. You know, so if you think of their seasons, they don't have winter and summer. They don't have long days and then short days. They have a wet season. You know, so they got a rainy season, they got a hot season, these types of things. And what's interesting there is it's pretty much, I mean, depending on how far south or north you are of the equator, but it's pretty much 12 and 12. You know, so you're getting 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness, which, again, when you start looking at things like bipolar disorder, for example, bipolar disorder, the further north you go, becomes more prevalent. So the greater the deviation between summer and winter is in terms of daylight hours and nighttime hours, the greater the levels of bipolar disorder are.
Interesting.
Where you don't have that as much because it's all steady, right? It's just 12 and 12 right the way through the whole year.
Yeah. So people react to the lack of sun, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. There's so much to get into with all of that. You know, just the way that your eyes interact with the light. You know, the interaction of light with things like melanin in your body.
Yes.
Your gut bacteria, by the way, they respond to light as well. They really need sunlight. I know they're on the inside, but all of that sunlight is coming in through your eyes and through your skin.
Right.
And then your mitochondria as well. Okay, is light. You know, they need light. So we are essentially precipitated light, if you want to get esoteric. And I think that we are light deprived in a sense, because think about what we do. Like in summertime, we go out and we put sunscreen on, which blocks all of the UV rays, okay, critical for producing vitamin D. We then throw sunglasses on. So now we're filtering all of the light that's coming into our eyes, which is critical for all the things I just discussed. And then at night, when the sun goes down, we're now exposing ourselves to blue light, which is the type of light that we should be exposed to natively during the day.
Right.
You know, and then just keep doing that for years and years and years. And what you find is the quantum clocks inside your cells, your cellular machinery actually becomes damaged over time simply because of disruptions in light. And then you can sort of layer on top of that electromagnetic frequencies.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
What is your intake on EMFs?
I mean, I spent like a year doing an energy medicine apprenticeship with a pretty well-renowned doctor. It was quite fascinating. As far as I know, I was her only apprentice. I don't know how I landed that gig. I was supposed to take over the clinic, and it just didn't happen. I think I was too young to take it over. She already had like 35, 40 years of experience at that point. So, but I say that because I think that EMFs are a bit of a quagmire in the sense that, you know, the detractors will say, oh, well, everything, you know, it's just energy, right? It's just electromagnetics, like your body will adapt to things. And it's like, to some degree they will, sure. But I think that, you know, our bodies are electromagnetic beings as much as we are chemical beings, as much as we are spiritual, physical, etc. We are also electromagnetic in nature. We are energy, right? And so if you think of all of everything in the world is made up of energy, right? It's just vibrating at different frequencies. And that's what makes this table hard. That's what makes the air the way it is. That's what makes water the way water is, right? It's just different frequencies. So if you also look at the Earth, what you'll find is we have these different frequency bands, okay? So you have them radiating from the inner core of the Earth, and then they sort of go out, 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 out. And you have, I forget what the actual frequency band is, but our bodies are supposed to resonate at the frequency that's found on the outer layer of the Earth, which is where we live. Okay. Once you start going out, 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 the frequency goes up. Okay. So this is why when people think of things like forest bathing, right? Why do we feel so good when we go and swim in the ocean? Why do we feel good when we go camping and we spend time in the forest? Why do we feel good when we're out in the snow, okay, going snowboarding or skiing? It's because the frequency that nature is emitting is actually the resonant frequency for our bodies. That's what we're supposed to be like resonating with, right? Well, what's happened now is we've introduced all of this artificial energy, if you will, these frequencies, and what's actually happening is they're very much out of tune with the resonant frequencies of our body. And so what happens is now there's the struggle, okay, where your body's trying to sort of vibrate at a certain frequency, if you will, and you've got all of these other they call them non-native EMFs. Okay, so I think we should distinguish between that as well. Non-native meaning man-made, meaning artificial EMFs, right? So think of your 5G now, like 6G will follow after that, which is going to be brutal. But these are artificial frequencies that are very, very high frequency in a sense. They're very much outside of our resonant frequency band. And so now what's happening is the body's trying to adapt to that. But some people can kind of get away with things a little bit more than others based on your genetics, your general level of health. But there's some people I've come across that are incredibly sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies, right? And what starts to happen is it just disrupts the way that your own body is functioning, right? Because again, we're all functioning at different frequencies, right? Inanimate and animate objects. So if you're getting pulled away from that, it basically just means that your body's not going to be functioning in the way that it's
you're
supposed
out of balance.
Yeah.
You're not in that equilibrium of the nature of what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And so, people have now, again, this is not my area of expertise. I just want to say that, I have spent a bit of time looking at this stuff, but it's not my area of expertise. There's no shortage of research to show that the negative impacts of EMFs. Let's just say that. There's a lot of research. A guy by the name of Dr. Martin Pall is his name, I think, Pall.
Okay.
Yeah. He's got a crazy paper out. Papers. And so, another book that's really good is The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg. And all of this stuff, what he looks at is he looks at the introduction of technological advances, which are usually electricity, right? So the internet, the phone, et cetera, et cetera. And what he's found is that all of these quote unquote pandemics, right? They all coincided with the introduction of new technologies, right? With new frequencies. So it's kind of interesting. If you think of the Rife machine, have you heard of the Rife machine before? No. Royal Raymond Rife? Yeah. No. So Royal Raymond Rife, his technology has been buried, but what he was doing was he figured out different frequencies for different organs in your body, and also different frequencies for different pathogens and stuff like that. And so what he was doing was, his main focus was cancer. He was actually sort of curing cancer with frequency.
Interesting.
So simply saying, like, if your cells or what have you are not functioning at the optimal frequency, and we introduce that frequency into your body and bring it back into balance, your body's now balanced, right?
Cancer, right?
Yeah. Oh. So it's quite interesting. Again, it's not my area of expertise, and so if anyone is an expert, don't hold me to the technicalities of that. But that's in a sense, what EMFs are doing to us. I think the challenge that we have now is how do we mitigate the damage from EMFs? And, there's no shortage of charlatans, who are selling EMF products where you're like, I don't know if that really works.
Right.
Yeah, so it's and it would be great to say, okay, let's all go live on the beach or up in the mountains, but unfortunately,
not everybody can do that. Unfortunately,
it's not reality. No,
we're going to be creating another big cities on the beaches.
Right.
It's kind of hard. So let me get back to let's go back to supplements. What are the biggest supplements? Not the biggest. What are the main supplements that actually people should be taking, and why?
Well, I really don't have a good answer for you because it's really dependent on the person, first of all. So I'm going to sort of put my holistic hat on. If you start getting into the research behind multivitamins, for example, lots of research to show that multivitamins don't really do anything. Okay. Again, it's a hard one to measure because you've got lots of different ingredients. All right.
Right.
I think, there's a couple of things that I would throw out there that I would consider probably foundational. Okay. One of those, and again, you can get this from food. It's just a little harder. One of those would be good fats. Okay. So particularly, and again, there's problems with all the stuff I'm about to talk about. So again, go and do your own research, go and look into different companies, etc. But like a lot of people are deficient in omega-3. Okay. I'm not a proponent of like we all need to just be guzzling, tons of omega-3. We don't need that much. But if you look at the diet, like just our food supply, there's not a lot of omega-3 in our diet. It's just the way that nature made it. You've got cold water fish, flax, chia, and it's pretty much it, right? There's not a whole lot. So I do think something like that on a regular basis is good. I also do think that trace minerals, right? So trace minerals with fulvic and humic acid, if you can, or even just fulvic acid and trace minerals, I think is really, really key, because our bodies are really deficient in trace minerals because our soil is really deficient in trace minerals. Okay, so minerals are something that you cannot make in your body. Your gut bacteria can make a lot of vitamins, right? So pretty much all of the Bs, I would say most of them, vitamin K, for example, your gut bacteria can synthesize those if they have the raw materials, aka if they have fiber, right? Minerals, your body can't make minerals. You have to get them from your food. So I think I've seen that a lot of people are mineral deficient, and the trace minerals, these are ones that we need in very, very small amounts. They are essentially helpers, so they help to metabolize a lot of the macro minerals. So I've seen a lot of people with long-standing iron deficiency, for example, calcium magnesium imbalances. Once they start adding trace minerals into that with fulvic acid, suddenly those deficiencies actually start to correct themselves, right? Whereas if they're just taking iron or just taking calcium magnesium, it's not getting into the cells, right? So that's where the trace minerals and the fulvic come in. Okay.
Yeah, there's also a lot of misconception about, or people don't have that understanding that there's certain vitamins or minerals that need to come together. Like you said, the trace minerals need to come in with the folic acid because of the component getting into your cell. Same thing with vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin A, right? You need that component of these vitamins to be absorbed properly.
Yeah. I mean, there's that. And I think also just nature, like I look to nature. Nature never provides you with one thing. There's no food that just has vitamin C or just has iron or just has B12. So, back in the day, I used to practice a lot more along the lines of what's called orthomolecular. So orthomolecular is, high doses, saturate the body, then peel back the dosage. Now, for the last probably 10 years, I've been a lot more in line with nature, which is broad spectrum formulations, right? Lower dosages. It's actually better. There is such a thing as over supplementation, to tell you the truth. And I think that for a lot of people out there, especially people in the health space, they're over supplementing. They're taking way too much. They're taking things they don't need to be taking, right. And they've kind of forgotten about food, So I want to just come back to your question and answer a couple of things. So I think, again, we could talk about vitamin D in the winter months. Look at that. It's a bit sticky because it depends on where you are in the world. If you're in Canada in the middle of winter, yeah, you're probably not making vitamin D. But if you're listening to this and you're sitting in Costa Rica, you're probably fine, as long as you're getting sunlight, etc. So that would be another one that I would sort of tack on there. And the others are really dependent on what's going on with your situation. But one of the things that I really like, and I think is pretty good for almost everyone, are your blue-green algae. Okay, so your spirulina and your chlorella. Mm-hmm. They're so loaded with nutrients. Plus, there's so many other health benefits to them. They're just like power-packed, in terms of nutrient density, that I love. For me, that's a functional food. It's a superfood, right? So I like sort of consuming that on a regular basis. So for me, and then forget about anything else that I'm doing, whether it's, if you're talking about working out, or if you're talking about optimizing brain health or balancing blood sugar, those to me are all really things that you would take specifically based on your needs.
Right. How about magnesium? Yeah. What are your thoughts of magnesium?
Yeah, I mean, there's no toxicity from magnesium, so that's fine. Again, it's like people ask me about turmeric as well. It's like, sure, like if you want to
If it helps, then yeah, sure.
Yeah, if it helps. I mean, I think the one thing that, just to be aware of is like with magnesium, magnesium does need to be balanced with calcium.
Right.
So there's ratios between calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and vitamin D. So I don't know this for sure, but I don't know that high dosing magnesium forever and ever and ever is like the best idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I always like to say, cycle your vitamins. So
Sure.
go on it for a month, then take it off for a month. Go in for a bit, and then take it off. So it's kind of like a rotational. In the summertime, I usually like, don't. Your food is the your main supplements. Focus on the food during summertime, and because we are in Canada, I find it that yes, in the wintertime, I think it's important to take your vitamin D and vitamin K and the magnesium. I think those are the three I would personally really strongly suggest to anybody who lives up north.
Yeah. Again, so vitamin D, like just get your levels checked as well. So it's pretty easy to do. And there's optimal ranges for that as well. So even if you're on the lower end and you're within range, try and get your levels up to middle of the range. Even, like higher than middle is usually the best in terms of optimal ranges. Mm-hmm. Okay. But yeah, the supplement question is such a tricky one because I get asked it all the time. Even people will ask me like, what should I take for XYZ? And I'm like, why do you have XYZ? So I'm not trying to be quirky or funny with people. I genuinely, that's just how my brain works as a clinician. Yeah. I don't ever try and like treat the disease. I'm always looking at the person and why you have what you have,
right. Right.
Yeah.
So Brad, this is the question. Health Canada.
Oh boy.
What's going on? Tell us, fill us in. I think this is a very, very interesting subject because as a holistic practitioner myself, I think it's very important to get to the core of it and how can we help? What can people do to be heard?
Yeah. I mean, before I launch into any of this, I'll just say that I would recommend people go to the nhppa.org. Just there's other people that are working on this, but the NHPPA, the Natural Health Products Protection Association, I've worked with them on and off for many, many years. They are pretty well at the forefront, and I would say that Sean Buckley, who spearheads that organization, there's no one else in Canada that's better qualified to tackle the issues that I'm about to discuss. So if you can support the nhppa.org, pretty much, and go visit their website. They've got campaigns, they've got things that you can do there. Mm-hmm. So before I get into the doomsday scenario here, just know that if you get behind them, start taking action using some of their resources, it's the best thing we can do right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. So basically, what happened was July of last year, 2023, Health Canada passed a bill, C-47, and C-47 was snuck in as, C-47 was a budget bill, okay? And buried in that budget bill was amendments to the, like, regulations around natural health products, okay? Basically what happened. There's a few different areas. I won't get too deep into them. Suffice to say that one of the things that they wanted to impose, and they are imposing on the industry now, is something called cost recovery fees. So cost recovery fees are what they typically use in the drug industry. Okay, so the drug companies, they'll say, hey, Health Canada needs licensing fees, they need stocking fees, they need fees for this, they need licenses and permits and all sorts of stuff. And then that's actually how Health Canada receives most of their funding, by the way, is through cost recovery from the drug companies. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what they've done is they said, hey, we need to start regulating natural health products more like drugs. Okay. And so part of that is we're going to impose these cost recovery fees on you. Well, turns out that the cost recovery fees are completely unnecessary, first of all. And what they do is they make it more costly for the manufacturers to operate. Okay, so to give you some examples, on the very, very high end of the spectrum, products that are multi-ingredient, that are more complex formulations and stuff like that, you'd be looking at about $76,000 a year to keep that one product on the shelf. Okay, so if you were a company, let's say you had 100 products, you do the math on that, right? it becomes,
Holy
that's
moly.
just one. So then you've got, so the cost recovery fees, right, is a big one. And Sean and Veronica from NHPPA actually went to one of the Health Canada, like it was like a working session or something like that, and they heard from the manufacturers, and most manufacturers said, listen, once this fully kicks in, 50 to 70% of our product line is gonna vanish,
They're gonna
right?
go.
It's gonna disappear, and a lot of them said that because of that, they will cease to operate in Canada. So that's like the road forward. Now, best case scenario, we all just land up paying 10 times more for product.
Right.
Which, again, given the landscape that we find ourselves in right now, with inflation, cost of living, etc., that's it's already hard. Like my friends that work in that industry, they've said that supplement sales have been down for the last 2 to 3 years. So that's just one aspect of that bill, right, is the cost recovery fees. Now, what they're doing with the cost recovery fees is they're actually now funding an enforcement arm or branch of Health Canada that now goes out into the marketplace and goes and surveils and watches what's going on in the marketplace. Okay. So I'll come back to that in a minute, but that's what they're using it for. Now, what are they policing? What are they surveilling? What are they looking into here? Well, this is another part of the bill. Is and they've actually just passed another bill like a month ago, Bill C-69, and I'll sort of tie that in here. So basically what they say is, if you look at products, all natural health products have to have a label claim. Okay, it's just how it is. So if you look at a B complex, it will say helps with metabolism of carbs, fats, and protein. That's it. Okay, maybe it'll say helps with energy. All right. So that's what's called a label claim, and that is technically what you are allowed to talk about. So if I go online and I say, oh my gosh, B complex is good for cognitive health, it's good for mitochondrial health, it's good for stress and adrenal glands, and, which it is, right? What you're now doing is you're making false claims. Even though we have the science, even though you can find the literature on PubMed and whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever documentation they have at Health Canada and whatever's on that label, that is the only thing you can say. So they now have enforcement, or like an enforcement branch that's going around and monitoring health food stores. They're monitoring the online space, social media, et cetera, et cetera. This is kind of happening now. So they haven't fully implemented all of this, but it's happening right now. I did a roundtable discussion with a bunch of herbalists from around Canada, and they are the first to have been targeted. So they've been issued with cease and desist orders, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So there's that. Then you got this other side of things, which I know less about, which is called the self-care framework. And so the self-care framework, basically, in a nutshell, it says that we're going to reclassify natural health products as therapeutics. Okay. So if it's a therapeutic, it now becomes a treatment. Right. Well, if it's a treatment, then now you're starting to dip your toe into the medical world, right, in the lingo. So what is treatable, what's not treatable, what can you buy over the counter versus what must be prescribed? Okay. So it's a bit of a gray area right now.
Private, right.
Yeah. So they haven't fully sort of unpacked that yet. But a big part of the self-care framework is this idea of Vanessa's Law. Okay. So with Vanessa's Law, there was a girl who died from taking I think it was an over-the-counter drug. And because of that, they came up with Vanessa's Law, and they said, hey, we can't have that happen again. So in the interest of safety, because natural health products are now being regulated as therapeutics, which is the same as an over-the-counter drug, now they're falling into the same boat, where we have to assume that natural health products are not safe until proven safe. Right. If you go to the US, natural health products are assumed to be safe until proven otherwise. And if you look at the track record with natural health products, they've got an impeccable track record, an impeccable safety profile. Like, we've done analyses on these over the years. Like, you are 14 times more likely to get hit by lightning, okay, than to die from a natural health product. So the whole idea of safety is kind of like, it's unfounded, first of all. Like, there's no safety signals in the marketplace. There's no consumer complaints. There's no product recalls. There's no tainted products. Like, none of these things are happening. So what Health Canada has basically said, they've sort of created this boogeyman where they've said, hey, everyone, we need regulations to make natural health products safe. And everyone goes, oh my gosh, that sounds awesome. And if you oppose that, then you're against regulations, right? And it's like, well, no, actually, that's not what's going on. In Canada, our natural health product regulations are some of, I would say, the best in the world. So much so that our regulations have actually been exported to other countries. That's how good they are. So we have very, very robust, like good regulations before any of this started happening. Our regulations are watertight, very, very safe, etc. And what this really is an attack on natural health. Okay, this is a long, ongoing attack that's been going on for like well over 100 years, for that matter. And so we've actually seen this flare up in the 90s. We saw it flare up in 2007, 2008, again in 2013, again in 2017, and now the big one, which is all of those things happening right now. So that is really what it is. And I've said this for many years. I've said this is the bureaucrats and the drug companies that are trying to strangle out natural health products and natural medicine by overregulation is really what it is. Okay. So yeah, I'll stop right there because that's about as condensed as I can give it to you right now.
So I would definitely put all the links and everything on the bottom of my script because I think it's very important for people to get educated and really find out what is really going on.
And then C69, yeah. And by the way, both of these have passed into law. So these are not bills anymore. These have actually become passed into law. Okay. And now what we're starting to see, especially for 47, by the way, there is also a bill in there to repeal that, right? So there's a private member's bill that Sean did with an MP. I think his name is Blake Culkin. I think his name is. I might have got that wrong. But he's an MP from Alberta. And basically, so this conversation is now happening at the federal level. It's happening at the government level. But Bill C-368 is a private member's bill that basically aims to repeal and remove those regulations, the changes to the natural health product regulations from C-47. So, all's not lost. It's definitely happening. But what that will do is, if that goes through, it will have to go to what's called the Standing Committee on Health. And the Standing Committee on Health, when they sneak these things into budget bills, right? So they did that with C-47, they did it with C-69. They sneak these things in so that it bypasses the Standing Committee on Health. So they basically don't look at it, and it just gets swept under the rug, and in it goes. So just to follow on what you were saying, I think it's really, really important that people get educated in this because, look, I know a lot of people in the space don't want to get political with things, and they don't like politics, and they don't like conflict and all that sort of stuff. But I just want you to think that if this is something that you rely on for your health and well-being, right? There's people out there that I've worked with. I've worked with the toughest cases. People have come through the ringer. They've gone through the medical route, the specialists, the drugs, the surgery, and whatnot. And they finally found that natural health products are the thing that's keeping them alive. If you fall into somewhere along there, this is a fight that you need to get involved in, unfortunately, because your life might actually depend on it. Second, if you're a practitioner, if you're a practitioner that relies on this for your livelihood, 100% you need to get involved here because your tools that you use to practice to sustain your life are going to get taken away from you.
So is this something that actually people or practitioners should knock at the MP's door?
150%, yes, okay, absolutely. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And, I should add, again, because I don't want to leave people in the dark or feeling like, oh my gosh, this is a terrible situation. Yes, it's bad. But there's been over 1 million postcards and letters that have been delivered to MPs around Canada in a year.
Perfect.
So I just want you to think about that in the context of, 40 million people. Again, not all of those people are into natural health, but the fact that we've had 1 million postcards so far, that's pretty good,
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. This is a really, really good news. We need more people like yourself and people from the group to be basically being out there and educating and letting people know what's going on. So I really appreciate you talking about this. So
yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Any final thoughts that you would like to share with the audience?
I think I'm good. I think that we're in a very, very turbulent time in society right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear. Um, you know, and there's no shortage of problems in the world, right? I mean, we can all acknowledge that. So I would just give you one piece of advice. This is the way I try and do it for myself: is as the world becomes more polarized, okay, and more contentious, try not to veer too far into the extremes. Okay, whatever that is, whatever your extreme is, whatever your beliefs are, try and just keep yourself a little bit more center of the road and keep your feet on the ground because we're coming into some very turbulent times. If you think it's rough now, it's we're in for a bumpy ride. I said that a few years ago. I said at the beginning of the pandemic, this is a multi-year struggle that we're in, and I think we will come out the other side. Like, I'm not worried about that, but I think that the what I'm seeing out there is I'm seeing a lot of people, because of the fear, because of anger, because of uncertainty, because of the environment that we find ourselves in, it's really impacting our lives in real life, right? So always know that what's going on out there in the online space is usually 10 times or 100 times worse than what's actually happening in real life. And the thing that matters most is what you do in your own home and what you do in your personal life. Okay. So try and stay a little bit more center of the road and keep your head screwed on and your feet on the ground.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more on that. So thank you. Brad, I really appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming on. I absolutely had an absolutely amazing conversation. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.